G'day guys, well you wanted a breakdown, so here's a breakdown. So quite a few of you asked for a strip and assemble video, or a breakdown video as you guys called it. It's a very American thing to say, but I'll leave it at that. Before I get into it, there are some things I want to cover off on. Firstly, being a correction to my last video on the muzzle thread, it's not M12 by 1, it's actually 1/2 inch by 28 TPI. Fairly close, but not the same thing. SCSA did drop a comment on the review video. So if you haven't seen their comment, go and read it. They give some good information. I did reply to their comment with some additional questions, but they never got back to us. They might have just forgotten. But these are all questions I feel like you guys want to know the answers to, so maybe get on there and hound them for the answers. I'll read you what it says in the manual in regards to disassembly. Now it's on page 14. Disassembly. The Taipan light comes completely assembled and there is, in bold, no need to disassemble the rifle. If there is a malfunction that cannot be resolved in the assembled state, then contact SCSA, the firearms dealer where the rifle was purchased, or your local qualified gunsmith. The disassembly of the rifle is not complicated, but there is a need for sound firearms knowledge to do so safely and be able to assemble and do the correct function tests required to ensure the firearm is safe to handle upon assembly. And that is a very, very good point that they write in here. If you don't know what you're doing, please do not do it. I will not take responsibility if you do what I'm going to do in this video and something happens to your rifle. There is a couple of warranty things in here that have popped up because there's been some comments on the last video. You can't fire hand loads or reloads out of this rifle. It will void your warranty. And there's a couple other things in the warranty at the back here. Limited warranty is null and void if the firearm has been misused, damaged, either by accident or abuse, fired with improper ammunition, fired with an obstruction in the barrel, damaged through failure to provide reasonable and necessary maintenance as described in the manual accompanying the firearm. Unauthorised repair or alteration, including of a cosmetic nature. I believe that means painting, so don't paint your rifle if you want to have a warranty, has been performed to the firearm by any other party other than SCSA. It's a limited warranty that doesn't get handed over to the next person, so if you're the original buyer, you have a full warranty. If you sell it to someone and you're the second owner, you don't have a warranty, so if anything breaks, you have to pay for it. We'll talk about maintenance from the manual when we get this stripped down. If you really want to do it correctly, you kind of need to disassemble the rifle. So I think that's enough yabbering. We'll put that over there for now. Let's jump into a close-up. I'll show you the tools you're going to be needing to do this disassembly. All right, so here's some things you're going to need. You don't need to have all these fancy bloody screwdrivers if you don't have them. You just need an Allen key set. I use these screwdrivers because I find them easy to use. However, I do need 2 Allens, and I'll explain why I need them a little bit later. So you'll need a 6mm, 5mm, and a 4mm. This is also a 4mm, and I'll explain why I have that and that separately as we go through the video. And you'll need a 2.5mm Allen. And that's all you really need, tools-wise, to strip the weapon down. So I'll bring you over to the gun mount and we'll get stripping. Obviously the first thing you're gonna do is clear the rifle, but unlike most other rifles when you strip them, you're not gonna fire off the action. You're gonna keep it in a safe condition after clearing it. It just makes the disassembly a little bit easier. All right, so we're gonna make sure that we are on safe. We're gonna cock the rifle, inspect the chamber. No, there's no magazine. Yep, you can stick a finger up in there, it's all clear. So now that we know that we're clear, if you have a muzzle device, take that off. I've already taken the muzzle device off this one, and that is just going to protect the inside of your handguard from scratching when you do remove the handguard. All right guys, you're going to grab your 4mm Allen, and we're going to start taking off these handguards. So these handguards only go on one way, so you can't really mess them up. And you can see why I like the screwdrivers. It makes short work of taking your screws out. All right, flip her upside down, and we're going to take off our bottom one. Now, this can go on either way. Just remember that the big side goes to the front. When we go to put that back on, you'll see that if it's not on the correct way, it will kind of misalign with the side ones, and I'll show that at the end. Right, last screw there. All right, so now we've got all that off. Now, you'll see that where that attaches to on the action bar is now free floating. So that means we're good to go on to the next part. So you can see we have these two 5mm Allens which hold the fore end onto your lower receiver. We also have these two 4mm Allens which attach your lower receiver to your upper receiver at the front, and then at the back, right in here, in that little aperture, is another 4mm Allen. Now, to get that out, you don't really have enough real estate to get in there. That end of an Allen is not long enough. That end gets stuck up on your pistol grip. So you do need to disassemble your pistol grip in order to get the lower receiver off the upper receiver. Now, if you wanted to just change your pistol grip, then you could forego what we've done at the front here and just go straight into this step here. So we're going to grab our 5mm screwdriver. It shouldn't be super tight. We're just going to undo that. Now you're going to notice that this is going to start lifting. You can see this gap forming here, and that is because on the right hand side, so the left as we look at the far side, there is actually a spring that goes down into the pistol grip, and I'm going to rotate this rifle just so you can see this. All right, so just in here, if the light's going to pick that up, the end of that pointer, you can just see there, that's a spring. Okay, so we have a detent plunger up in here, which is going into our safety catch, and we have a spring that is housed within the plastic. If you're going to swap out this, be aware that you don't want to lose that spring because that affects your safety catch. It's not a very long bolt, so once that's had a few turns, you should be able to start popping that up. Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to cut my hand behind it. I'm going to grab that spring, and that's how I'm holding it there, like that, just so it doesn't fly away. You will have that bolt come out the bottom, as you would have seen that drop just then. I caught that. And then there is your spring. So let's put that in a little parts bin. Now, you want to get this detent out now, because otherwise if you flip the gun and don't realise it's there, you're going to drop it. All right, so there's your little detent plunger right there. So what I'm going to do, stick my thumb over it, rotate the rifle, cut my hand underneath, and catch that. All right, that is actually aluminium. So if you drop it, you can't use the magnet to pick it up. All right, nothing. So be careful with that little part there. All right, so now we're going to move on to the fore end. Now you can either do the fore end first and then the pistol grip, or do the pistol grip and then the fore end. It doesn't really affect anything. So you could move completely from the front all the way to the back, or you could do it in the way I've done it, where I've taken all the grips off and then I'm moving on to stripping the rest of the rifle. So we'll just undo these. And then if I can reach around this camera here, that foregrip is going to come off. Now you can see we have a tab where the screw holes go, and that aligns up with our lower receiver. Slide that off, being careful not to scratch it, and then we can put that off to the back there. Okay, so now we're on to our screws. Our 3 screws are going to hold our lower receiver to our upper receiver. This is where, if you are using this style of screwdriver, you would need to get a normal Allen to be able to fit this, because the shank on that screwdriver doesn't fit. It's kind of awkward for me trying to reach around a camera. Right, so now, if we give these two parts a bit of a wiggle, we're going to be able to separate our lower receiver from our upper receiver. To get this apart, at the moment, this cam has been rotated and it's sitting approximately down at here. So if this was up the other way, it would be in the probably 10 or 11 o'clock position. What we want to do is push back on our action bar to bring our bolt rearwards. We've taken our cam out of this recess and we've put it on the north-south slot. Now that's going to allow us to pull our bolt carrier group out by pulling up on our bolt carrier group. Now all we can do is just retract our action bar off our barreled receiver. Apologies, my camera is playing silly buggers with the focus here. Now, if you want to take the butt off your lower receiver, you could do this at any point. Let's say you wanted to swap this out for the adapter they've made for it, where you can put I believe it's a folding stock or a telescopic stock. This is how you would take that off. It's super simple. This is where you need your 6mm. I'm just going to undo that. And those two parts separate. So here we have our lower receiver. Now, it does say in the manual, do not strip any part of the trigger pack. It does have anti-tamper blue stuff on these screws. So you can't do anything with that because they'll know you did it and you void your warranty. So here's your bolt latch. Just here is this little piece, all right, and you can see that sliding out there. Don't lose that, all right, because that's all bad. It does have a groove in it, so if it does come out, the groove goes down, and that's how you know the orientation of it. Push that back in. That needs to stay in there, don't take that out. Now, coming to cleaning and maintenance, it does tell you how to clean and maintain in the manual fairly well. They do say to push the cleaning rod in from the muzzle end, like that, down to the chamber. I generally think that's a bad idea. Not so much with carbon fibre. Carbon fibre is pretty easy on the rifling. However, back in the ye oldies, they blew out a lot of crowns of muzzles by pushing steel cleaning rods down from the muzzle end down to the chamber end on things like Martini Henrys and stuff like that, where you can't get a cleaning rod in from the back of the action. So it's just been a general bit of doctrine for the last like 120 years to not put a cleaning rod down from the muzzle end. But you know, they're saying in the manual to do it, and I believe if you use a carbon fibre rod, you're not running that much of a risk. Does also mention in there to use a bore snake. I know a lot of people don't like bore snakes because they think that they're going to fall apart in the rifle and damage the rifle. I've never really found them to be a drama. So I'm just going to push a bore snake in through our chamber end until that comes out the bottom. Now you can do this with the rifle still assembled, just pull the bolt to the rear. I'm going to give that a pull. All right, and do that as many times as needed until the bore looks clean. Now you can't get your head behind the chamber end to look through, so you have to look through from the muzzle end, point the open part of the receiver to the light, and you can see that's nice and clean. I wouldn't really worry about putting too much lubrication down inside your trigger pack. If you want to put a little drop of oil into your bolt catch, feel free to do so. But apart from that, your lower receiver doesn't really need much maintenance at all. All right, so when it comes to our bolt group, one safety check is that your cam is not malfunctioned. And on this particular one, after a few rounds, is broken. That's a common fault that I have heard of. It will go back together and it will somewhat function, but it is a broken part of the mechanism and that needs to be replaced. I thought it was an issue only on the prototypes where they said they overheat treated them or something, but they seem to be happening a lot on the production models. So I would definitely check that before running a lot of rounds through it because you don't want to cause yourself a mischief. To clean the face of the bolt, let's just grab a standard cleaning brush that you can buy from literally any gun shop ever. And you would just brush the front of your bolt and make sure that you get all of the carbon and crap off that primer ring. And by primer ring, I mean the ring of carbon that comes from the back of the primer. And make sure the firing pin protrusion hole is clear. On the inside of the upper receiver, you just want to make sure that's nice and clean. Now, depending on which lubricants, depending on how you're going to clean that. You can use oils or you can use a type of grease. If you are going to grease your bolt carrier, do not mix it with oil. Grease and oil doesn't mix. So pick one lubricant and stick to it, or clean it completely before changing lubricants. If you were going to grease it, it would just be a little bit of grease up in the cam groove, and that would probably do you, maybe a little bit on the inside of the rails. So we'll move back over to the gun vise and we'll go through some reassembly. All right, so to reassemble this, we're just going to go in reverse order of what we just did. So I'm going to put the butt back on. All right, so that's obviously not very tight. There's that wiggle that I was talking about, and the more it wiggles, the looser that gets. So you kind of do need to tighten that down. That's pretty tight. All right, minimal wiggle there. All right, so we can put this back off to the side because we need to put our bolt carrier and our action bar back in our upper receiver to be able to put that back together. Grabbing our action bar, you're going to slide the action bar over the barrel. You're going to see there is an aperture. I'm always losing my pointer. There is a slot aperture just up in here, and that's where that part of the action bar is going to go back into the receiver. Now we can see where this cam is going to sit. So if you have a look in the dog leg here, you need to have that over the vertical or the north-south part of the cam groove. If you have it down here, it will allow the cam on the bolt carrier to flop around, and it will make it harder for you to get the bolt seated down. What we're trying to do, and we put this bolt in just so you know what you're doing, because you're not going to be able to see this, you want to have the top of the action bar like that on your bolt. Okay, so you've got these two recesses locked in, and we have this stud into that aperture. All right, so that's what we're trying to achieve, but upside down like that. All right, so we have our action bar roughly lined up. I'm going to have to move the camera so you can see that, because I need that to be down to be able to do it. All right, can everyone see? Good. This cam needs to be fully forwards, which means our bolt is fully forward. So if it's back and rotate, you can see the bolt is backwards. All right, push that all the way forwards. Now you would just flip this up, all right, and drop this down in until it seats flush. I'm just going to try and do it in a weird way so you can kind of see what I'm doing. All right. Now you can see that's clicked down. I'm going to point a couple of things out. So you've got these rails on the insides here, and that's what the bolt carrier in this upside down position is sitting up onto. When it's on the lower receiver, that's going to have pressure up on it from the lower receiver. So it needs to sit up on those rails flush. All right, you should be able to move it all like that. If you hold the bolt carrier and try to move the action bar, everything should be locked together. All right, if that doesn't go into the chamber like that, then it means that you have not got this in the correct position. So that's your first check of assembly, is you're going to make sure that that functions before you go anywhere else, because otherwise you're going to do yourself a bit of a mischief. Now, when you're putting this together, you need to keep the bolt carrier kind of in the middle. If you have it all the way forwards, it makes it kind of hard to get the lower receiver on. Just keep it in the center, so if you can see, that's where your bolt lock would normally go. I've found that if you line it up with the front of the bolt carrier, you're in a pretty good position to get your lower receiver on. We need to make sure that our hammer is cocked, and this is why when we pulled it apart, we had it unfired. So we need to make sure that is cocked all the way down. We're still on safe. All right, we're going to push this down here, and you can see how that's lining up. You can see that we have nice fitment across this line here. All right, if you have a gap like that, that is not correctly fitted. That may be because your bolt is not sitting in the correct position. So go back to the check of assembly I just showed you, redo that, and then get back up to this position if you need to. I'm just going to put my finger and thumb there to hold this in position. Autofocus is playing silly buggers on me again. All right, so let's drop this rear screw in. Sorry about the focus, guys. I don't have a cameraman here. All right, so we're just going to put this rear screw in just until you can feel the threads just start to take up some torque. That'll do for now, until we really tighten that up. All right, put our front ones in. Oh, I can't get it. I have to go left-handed again to get it out of the way of the camera. All right, so once again, just until you feel the threads take up torque. Now, a lot of people are going to ask about torque settings. They obviously don't specify torque settings. Being that these are steel screws going into aluminium, I would say don't go anything above about 30 inch-pounds-ish in that sort of bracket. To put in perspective, a normal bolt-action rifle with steel screws and steel receiver is generally from about 40 to 60 inch-pounds of torque. Now, if you go too much torque, you run the risk of stripping out the aluminium threads. If you don't go enough, obviously they might back out. Now, you don't need to go stupidly hard. In fact, I'll show you a little trick. So if you are using a normal dogleg Allen like that, and you can turn it with your thumb, that's generally about 25 inch-pounds. Obviously, that's very subjective, depends on how tough your hands are. So we're at roughly 25 to 30-ish. All right, and that's enough to hold that together. If you put it in that way and you turn like that, you're usually going upwards of 30 inch-pounds, and that is just a quick little ready reckoner. But what I'll do is I'll break out the torque wrench, and I will just show you that being torqued. All right, so this is on 30 inch-pounds, and it came straight over. So there you go. Obviously, I can't fit that in the back one there because of that. So that's just a good little handy tip for you. If you don't have a torque wrench handy, the different points of leverage will give you different amounts of torque. What we'll do is we'll put back together this pistol grip part while we've got the camera set up here, and just to show you that this part and the front doesn't need to be done in any particular order. So we're going to, firstly, we're going to grab our little detent. All right, so you can see on that it has a head on it and then a point down the bottom. All right, so head and point. The point needs to go downwards into the receiver. So we're going to grab that part and back into that hole, drop it, and it should sit further down than flush. We're going to make sure that we're still on safe. Now you can kind of feel if that's in, you shouldn't be able to pull your safety catch out. We know it's in the detent now, so that is all good to go. Now we're going to get our pistol grip and our spring. Put your spring into your pistol grip. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this receiver around just so you can see what I'm going to do with this spring. Can we all still see? Yes, we can. Let's do a zoom. All right, let's hope that stays into focus for us. I'm going to place this, I'm holding that spring with my thumb, place that over the top. Now you can see where our spring is. I'm going to push that back slightly until it hits our hole, drop that down, hold it there, and then I will get our screw. Once again, guys, don't go too over top on the, oh, you can't really see what I'm doing, zoom out. Don't go too over the top with the torque on this, because it is threading into aluminium. Till it's tight, don't need to kill it. And now we can check our second check of assembly, which is that our safety catch is functioning. All right, so we have audible clicks on both positions. We know that our spring is working, we know our detent's in there correctly, and everything is all good. All right, so we're now going to move on to our fore end. We're near the end, pun intended. All right, so now we're going to move on to putting our fore end back on. So obviously this is upside down, that is in the upside down position. We have this block with our two screw holes in it, needs to go through that position there, so we can screw it back in. So we are going to firstly slide our action bar fully forwards, and then we're going to slide on our fore end. Being careful not to scratch anything. All right, and that will slip straight through there like that. Now if I flip this back over and pull that back off, you're going to see something. All right, just here. We have a little locking lug here with a recess on the front, so that needs to line up as well. So should go together like that. You're doing well, team. You're near the end. You've listened to me crap on for long enough. All right, so we're going to whack those screws back in. All right, once again, you don't need to kill them. Let's zoom out. Grip's pretty easy. Right, so let's start with our bottom one because we've got to orientate it that way. Remember, the big one goes to the front. It has this part here, which is going to help you lock into your groove. So put that down there. Now don't go spastic on these ones because it is just plastic. All right, so not very tight at all. Because you don't want to crack that plastic, that would be all bad. All right, so we're going to do the left-hand side now. So the left-hand side should be this one. All right, and you can see that is the correct one because it lines up like that. If you attempted to put this on backwards, you could see there that it doesn't line up. You have this weird edge. If you try to put the other one, the other side on, you can see that it doesn't line up either. All right, so you can't stuff that up. Just keep flicking the parts around until you get the right one. Now these plastic guards may not line up exactly. You can see on this one we have a bit of a gap in here, if the light's going to shine on that correctly. You can see we have a bit of a gap in here. This side not as much. That just is what it is. All right, so now we need to go into our final check of assembly. We've already had 2 checks of assembly so far. We've had our bolt check of assembly to make sure that is assembled correctly and is in the upper receiver, is functioning correctly. We've had our safety catch check of assembly to make sure that that subsystem is put together correctly before moving on, and now we're on to our final check. So to do our final check, we're going to make sure that we are still on the safe position. We're going to hit our bolt latch and we're going to cock the gun. We're going to double check that it is clear, and somehow a round didn't accidentally go in there while we're putting that back together. Bolt fully forwards. Now, keeping it on safe, we're going to check that the safety catch is actually working and is actually going to stop the weapon from firing. All right, so we're on safe, pull the trigger, nothing happens, weapon doesn't fire, good to go. We're going to flick that over to fire now. We're going to fire. So an audible click, and we know our hammer is dropped. Holding the trigger all the way to the rear, we're going to cock the rifle. We're going to put the working parts forwards again. Now we should hear an audible click when we release the trigger, and that's telling us that our sear reset is working. Audible click is heard. We're then going to fire again. Fires, go back to safe. Your final check of assembly is now complete. So there you have it. There's a very long-winded way of pulling down your rifle to conduct necessary maintenance. Now you would notice that I didn't go all the way down to pulling everything apart, because that's not what I'm trying to show you in the video. If you find you have broken parts during that step where you're pulling it apart to maintain it, contact SCSA immediately to get them to rectify the fault. Keep the weapon lubricated, keep the chamber clean, and remove oil out of the chamber and bore before firing. This is all CDF, common dog fuck. It's all things that are in the manual as well, so please read the manual before using your firearm. I think that's everything I need to cover off on. I hope that was informative. I hope you got something out of that. If you want to support the channel, I have a Patreon, and the link is in the description below. I'll see you next video, and hooroo.